Okay, have you ever, like, felt totally lost in translation when you're talking to your partner?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, we're supposed to be in love, right? Not decoding hieroglyphics or something.
Right, exactly.
But it happens to the best of us.
It does. It really does.
And that's why we're doing this deep dive today into an episode of Love and Real Talk.
Oh, interesting.
It's this podcast all about relationships, communication, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought they brought up a really interesting point right away.
What was that?
They kind of start with that stereotype, right? Men just want to fix things, women just want to be heard.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've all heard that one.
But they actually went a little deeper, I thought.
Did they?
Yeah, instead of just being like, oh, men and women are different, end of story, they actually talked about, like, why those communication patterns might exist.
I see. So kind of getting at the root of things.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did they say? What are some of those reasons?
Well, they were talking about how, a lot of times, guys, they're raised to be problem solvers.
Right.
So when their partner's upset, their instinct is to, like, jump into fix-it mode.
Okay.
Even if that's not what the partner actually needs in that moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So it's not really about men being from Mars and women being from Venus.
Right.
It's more about having these different kind of ingrained approaches to communication.
Yeah, and, if you don't recognize that,
Uh-huh.
it can lead to a lot of misunderstandings and frustration.
Totally. And speaking of misunderstandings, Jason and Sophie also talked about how assumptions can really mess things up.
Assumptions, yeah. Those are dangerous.
Sophie actually shared this story, and it's kind of funny, but she gave her boyfriend the silent treatment.
Oh, no. What happened?
Because he forgot to text her goodnight.
Ow.
And it sounds kind of silly,
Yeah.
but I'm sure we can all relate to that feeling of, like, when
Yeah.
you expect something and it doesn't happen, and you get all in your head about it.
Yeah, totally.
So it really highlighted how, like, instead of just asking directly, can create all this unnecessary drama.
That's so true. Communication is key, right?
Exactly. But you know what I was wondering?
What's that?
Like, why do we even make these assumptions in the first place?
Good question.
Is it just, like, laziness, or is there something deeper going on?
Yeah, I think it's a little more complicated than just laziness.
Right.
I mean, sometimes it's easier to just avoid potential conflict.
Right.
Like if you assume you know what your partner's thinking, you don't have to have that potentially difficult conversation.
Right.
And maybe we're afraid of rocking the boat, or maybe we've been hurt in the past.
Yeah.
So we kind of retreat into those assumptions as a way to protect ourselves.
It's almost like we're building walls instead of bridges,
Exactly, yeah.
And as we saw with Sophie and her boyfriend, those walls can quickly turn into, like, fortresses of frustration. So how do we break out of that assumption trap?
That is the question, isn't it?
And how do we actually start building those bridges of understanding?
Well, that's where I think Jason and Sophie offered some really helpful advice.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready.
So their first tip was really simple, but powerful.
Okay.
Ask for clarification.
Oh.
It seems so obvious, right?
Yeah.
But how often do we let those assumptions just simmer
Oh, yeah.
instead of just directly saying, like, hey, is something bothering you? Or what do you mean by that?
Oh, I am so guilty of that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in my own head,
Yeah.
and create these elaborate stories about what my partner's thinking.
Right.
But just asking for clarification, it's like hitting the reset button
It is.
on a potential misunderstanding.
It takes the guesswork out of it,
Uh-huh.
and it opens the door for a more honest conversation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Now, their second tip builds on this foundation of clarity.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's about listening to understand, not just listening to respond.
Oh, that is a good one.
Right. So it's not about, coming up with your next brilliant retort.
Mm-hmm.
It's about actually absorbing what your partner is saying.
Okay, that is a really important distinction, I think.
It is.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of, like, waiting for your turn to talk.
Totally.
Or, like we were saying before, jumping into problem-solving mode.
Absolutely.
When that's not what's needed.
Right.
So are we talking about active listening here?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, active listening, it goes beyond just hearing the words, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about paying attention to, like, the nuances of communication.
Oh.
So not just the verbal, but the nonverbal cues, too.
Oh, interesting. So, like, their tone of voice.
Exactly.
Body language.
Yeah.
All of that.
All of it, yeah.
Okay, wow.
And a really great technique within active listening is reflecting back what you've heard.
Oh, that's interesting.
It could be as simple as saying, it sounds like you're feeling really frustrated because of whatever the situation is.
Okay.
But it shows them that you're really trying to understand their perspective.
It's like you're holding up a mirror to their feelings so they feel heard and validated.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Now, we've talked a lot about listening, but there's another important piece to this puzzle.
There is.
Yeah. Jason and Sophie's third tip focuses on expressing your own needs clearly.
Oh, okay.
Now, I know this one can be tricky
It can be.
because nobody wants to feel like they're nagging or complaining all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's about finding that balance between being assertive and being respectful.
Okay, so how do we do that?
One of the most effective ways is to use I statements instead of you statements.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you give an example?
Sure. So instead of saying, you never help around the house.
Which, let's be honest, can sound kind of accusatory.
Yeah, it definitely can.
Yeah.
You could try saying, I feel overwhelmed with all the housework, and I would really appreciate it if we could share the responsibilities more evenly.
Okay, so it's like you're shifting the focus from blame to collaboration.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And when we frame our needs as requests rather than attacks, it just opens up the possibility for a more constructive and compassionate dialogue.
That's so true.
Right.
So, okay, we've talked about these 3 really key tips.
Yeah.
Asking for clarification, listening to understand, and expressing our needs clearly.
Absolutely.
But, knowing these things and actually putting them into practice
Oh, I know.
are 2 totally different things.
They are.
So how do we actually make this work in, our real, messy, complicated relationships?
Right, because it's easy to talk about it in theory, but real life is a different story.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be exploring next as we continue our deep dive.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Me too. This is fascinating stuff.
It really is, though, isn't it?
Like, we all have our own baggage, insecurities, and our own weird communication quirks.
Absolutely. We all do.
So how do we actually have those tough conversations without letting those old patterns take over?
That's the big question.
Right. It's like we've got these tools, right? Asking for clarification, listening to understand, expressing our needs clearly. But then real life happens and
It does.
things get messy.
Yeah.
So, like, where do we even begin?
Well, I think self-awareness is huge.
Okay, self-awareness. Yeah.
Like, we need to understand our own triggers. You know?
Triggers.
Yeah, the things that make us jump to conclusions
Oh, okay.
or get defensive or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I get that.
Because if we can recognize those patterns in ourselves, then we can start to, interrupt them.
Okay, so let's actually break this down a little bit.
Okay.
Let's start with asking for clarification.
Okay, good one.
Seems easy enough in theory.
Right.
But it can be hard sometimes, to resist that urge to jump to conclusions.
Oh, I know.
Or just let those assumptions, stew.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Totally. Sometimes just asking, what do you mean, can feel, confrontational,
It can, especially if you're feeling sensitive.
Yes, exactly.
So how do we do it without sounding accusatory?
Right.
Well, I think it's all about approaching the conversation with genuine curiosity.
Okay.
And a real desire to understand.
Okay.
So instead of saying, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Try something like, hey, I noticed you seem a bit quiet. Is there something on your mind?
Okay, that's a much gentler approach.
It is, isn't it?
It's like you're inviting them to open up instead of putting them on the spot.
Exactly, yeah.
And then if they do share something that's bothering them,
yeah,
that's where active listening comes in, right?
Exactly.
But I gotta be honest, I struggle with that sometimes.
Do you?
Yeah, my mind wanders, or I start planning my response before they're even finished talking. Oh yeah, we've all been there.
So any tips for becoming a better listener?
Well, one thing that can really help is this technique called mirroring.
Mirroring, okay.
You basically reflect back what you've heard.
Okay.
You can summarize their main points, acknowledge their feelings. You could even use some of the same phrasing they used.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It really shows that you're tuned in.
So it's not just about nodding and saying, uh-huh.
Right.
It's about really demonstrating that you get it.
Exactly.
And that you're trying to see things from their perspective.
Yeah, and it also helps you stay focused.
Oh.
Because you have to really be paying attention to do it effectively.
That's true. That's true.
So it's a win-win.
I like it.
And then when it comes to expressing our own needs.
Oh, yeah, that's the tough one.
It can be, but remember those I statements.
Okay, right. The I statements.
They can really make a difference.
Remind me how those work again.
Basically, you're framing your needs as requests, not accusations. So instead of saying, you always leave your clothes on the floor,
right,
you could say, I feel stressed when the house is messy. And I would really appreciate it if we could work together to keep things tidy.
Okay, yeah, that sounds so much better.
Doesn't it?
It does. It takes the blame out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's about being a team.
Okay, so be specific. Use I statements. Got it.
And the other thing is, practice makes perfect.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Think of it like learning a new language.
Okay.
At first, it might feel awkward,
Uh-huh.
but the more you use these techniques, the more natural they'll become.
So it's like building a communication muscle.
Exactly. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
I love that.
And then you'll be able to communicate more effectively.
And that leads to stronger relationships.
It does. It really does.
It sounds like a win-win.
It is. It is.
But let's be real for a sec. Even with the best communication skills in the world, there are still going to be misunderstandings and conflicts, right?
Oh, absolutely. Relationships are messy. There's no way around it.
So how do we deal with that?
Well, I think the key is to approach those challenges with a willingness to learn and grow together.
Okay.
So instead of seeing conflict as a failure, we can see it as an opportunity to understand each other better.
Okay, so like a chance to deepen the connection.
Exactly. Because the goal isn't to win every argument.
Right.
It's to find a way to connect.
Even when you disagree.
Even when you disagree. Yeah, that's the hard part.
It is, but it's so important.
It is.
And, this whole idea of connection as the ultimate goal,
Yeah.
that really sticks with me.
It's powerful, isn't it?
It is, because it's like all these communication tools we've been talking about,
Yeah.
they're not just about fixing problems.
Right.
They're about building a bridge to that deeper connection.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be exploring more as we continue our deep dive.
Yeah, like when you really feel like your partner gets you,
Uh-huh.
it just creates this sense of like safety and closeness,
It does. It's so important.
And it's not even about agreeing on everything.
Right.
It's more about like just acknowledging their feelings and respecting their perspective.
Yeah, and that's where those I statements can be really helpful.
The I statements, right?
Yeah, because they allow you to, set boundaries and express your needs without attacking the other person.
Right. It's not about blame. It's about
Exactly.
working together.
Yeah, it's about saying, this is how I feel,
Uh-huh.
and this is what I need.
Oh.
Not, you did this wrong,
Right.
and you need to fix it.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference.
It does. It really does.
So when both people in the relationship feel heard and understood,
Yeah.
it just creates this foundation of like trust and respect.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's why I think, like you were saying before, the goal of communication shouldn't be to win.
No.
It should be to find solutions.
Right. Solutions that work for both of you.
Yeah, that work for both partner. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because you're on the same team.
Right. Oh, totally.
Even when you have different opinions or ideas.
We're in this together.
Exactly.
And that's such a mind shift,
It is.
to go from like keeping score
Yeah.
to actually collaborating.
Yeah.
To create something that works for both of us.
And that's where all those communication tools we've been talking about come in.
Oh, right. Like the asking for clarification and
Active listening.
expressing your needs clearly.
It all ties together.
Okay, so like if we can just master these tools, we're basically setting ourselves up for relationship bliss.
Well, I don't know about bliss,
Okay, fair enough.
but I think it definitely helps. Relationships are always going to be a work in progress.
Yeah, of course.
There will be ups and downs, challenges,
Right.
but these tools can help you navigate those things with more grace and understanding.
It's like having a roadmap for communication,
Oh, I like that. A roadmap.
Yeah, instead of getting lost in like assumption land,
Yeah, exactly.
we can actually find our way to like a deeper connection.
That's a great way to put it.
And it's not about being perfect.
Oh, definitely not.
It's more about like being willing to put in the effort.
Effort and being willing to keep learning.
Yeah, to keep learning and growing.
And adapting.
Exactly. Because relationships change, we change,
They do, yeah.
and our communication needs to evolve too.
That's so true.
Okay, well, this has been an amazing deep dive.
It has, hasn't it?
I feel like I've learned so much about like communication and relationships.
Yeah, me too.
And, this whole idea that communication is about building connection.
It's so powerful.
It really is.
And I hope that, as our listeners kind of take these tools and apply them in their own lives, that they'll experience that same sense of connection.
Totally. And that they'll discover that, communication can really be this superpower
It can be. It can be.
that helps us like build bridges and heal wounds and, create those lasting bonds that we all want.
Yeah.
So as you go about your day today, maybe think about, what's one communication tool you can start using today to
Right.
create more connection in your own relationships?
That's a great challenge.
It could be something super simple, like just sending your partner a text that says, "Hey, I'm listening."
I love that.
You never know what kind of ripple effects that one small action can have.
That's so true.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And remember, communication is a superpower.
It is.
So use it wisely.
And with love.
And with love. Exactly. Thanks
Love.
again.